St. John was the melting pot of America.
There were ethnicities from all over Europe. I mean, the Slovakians, Armenians, Macedonians. It was just a hodgepodge of ethnic groups.
Most blacks, as they migrated, they couldn't afford tickets on trains, so they hoboed. They hitchhiked. And they got off, wherever they got off, that's where they made their home, and it's usually by the railroad tracks.
We had Mexican people, we had German people, we had Russian people, we had black people, but they was called colored people.
We used to call Flint just a big country hick town because everybody knew everybody, and blacks were in little pockets, and you didn't just live, and then any place.
My name is Norman Bryant, and my family moved to Flint, Michigan in 1943.
Douglas Bivens. I was born and raised here in Flint. I'm a product of Willie Page and Adolphus Bivens. My mom was born in East St. Louis. My dad was born in Horton, West Virginia.
Well, I grew up on 837 East Jameson Street, and then my mother and father bought a house on Parkland.
I first came to Flint and stayed on Vermont off of St. John.
My father and mother both came from Georgia, and but my mother's father came here first. He and his brother, and well, there were 7 of them, but anyway, my grandfather got in a little trouble down in Georgia, and so he and his brother came to Flint.
Coming up, my father and my mother, they separated, and I was separated from my siblings. Therefore, my grandparents raised me. And we lived at 1112 Dakota, and that's where we stayed until Urban Renewal came.
The north side was where the blacks migrated most of the time geographically because Buick of the foundry work.
The automobile industry began to take a foothold, in the city. They lived in tents and built campgrounds, and of course, the Buick factory started where the Buick foundry site used to be, and then it expanded from there. So most of the encampment was along the St. John Trail at the time, St. John Street, and that's where people eventually began to build homes and schools and businesses, etc.
Work going down in the city of Kankakee, my dad migrated to Flint, Michigan in 1952. He came up, and him and the Wood brothers, Willie Woods, Eddie Woods, Ben Woods, all of them migrated to Flint and hired in the Buick plant, the foundry, and the Buick plant. And then Dad came back and picked us up in 1953, July of 1953, we moved to Flint, Michigan.
Talk about migration. My father moved here in 1942, quite by accident. He was working at a laundry in Dyersburg, Tennessee. And he left the laundry on work break, and it was a guy parked in front of the laundry. And he called him to the car and asked him, he said, he said, I'm about to open a cleaners in Flint, Michigan, and I need a presser. Well, my dad happened to be a presser. He said, well, you just found one. And he said, well, I'm leaving for Flint in 3 days. You want to go back with me? He said, yeah. At that time, I was 2 years old.
Housing was terrible. as Norm was saying, Flint was segregated. You couldn't buy or rent nothing west of Saginaw Street. So the only place you could go was the St. John area.
St. John, starting from Stewart, Nevada, Oregon, Idaho, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, New Jersey, Vermont, Rhode Island, Massachusetts.
In the 50s, early 50s and everything, people were moving into Flint all the time, and we called them Russians. They rushed right in to get those good jobs at General Motors.
Life was, you knew everybody. Everybody practically knew you. You were very respectful. You didn't hear any profanity, but we did say it, but we made sure the grown folks didn't hear it, you understand? And we played kick the can, pom-pom, pal away, get your horse and run away. We played hide and go seek, those type things.
Born in 1950, so I was a kid, 50 going up to 60, so I was just playing. I was just enjoying myself, running up and down the street, climbing trees, getting, bruises and scratches all over me, and playing with the neighborhood kids. And I felt really safe and comfortable in my neighborhood.
So if we shoveled enough snow or cut enough grass, we had enough money to walk down the tracks, down past the DuPont plant, to the Palace or the Rialto, or one of the 5 or 6 theaters that were downtown. So it was really a joyous time in my life.
See, before in the 50s, 40s, 50s, if you had kids, they knew everybody. All the kids knew each other. And so if somebody new moved into somebody coming, the kid would say, oh yeah, such and such a person moved down the street and they've got a dog and they've got da-da-da-da-da. And, kids were the little ambassadors.
And I always enjoyed the parades we had. I enjoyed the street dances, and everybody just having a good time.
Some of the stuff we miss also, we had peach trees in the back of our yard. We did gardens, a lot of apple trees, cherry trees,
pear trees.
and we borrowed from those trees. Like, we go up and climb.
We borrowed.
Well,
Just tell it like it is.
some of y'all got caught in them people's, got
caught all the time.
Mr. Gaines,
Mr. Gaines lived right across the street from me, and he had the biggest, prettiest, largest cherries.
Yeah.
Everybody had cherries, but theirs were
My
the
neighbor
best.
did too.
You always look at the other, and they always look better.
But St. John area was jumping. As Norm said, we had Himmerhawks, the Meat Man. We had a Columbia Theater over there too. And then we would go over there and just have fun. It was like a new adventure to walk because we didn't have no money. So we walked to wherever we wanted to go and had fun.
Southwestern didn't have nothing on the hill that was at Fairview.
Fairview School, yeah.
We had a hill that wouldn't wait, that you could slide down what they call tobogganing. We had a hill. You had to just watch that you didn't go too close to the river, but we had a hill.
We had, coming down St. John to Stewart Street, you got Nevada Street, then Stewart. On the corner, right there on the corner of Nevada, what they call the rollerboat skating ring. You go skating on Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and I think even you could go Sunday.
But the roller derby, hey man, that roller skating in there so much, it was so dusty that they call it the Dust Bowl. We nicknamed it the Dust Bowl.
We would go out to Flint Park because of the race thing. We could go out there on Mondays only, black only, okay? They had the Flint Park amusement park. You could go out there skating. Well, those were fun times for us, okay? Later on, we started skating at the St. John Street Center, and on the south side is Stewart School.
I enjoyed, had a lot of little friends. You could ride your bike and nobody bothered you. The Richard Theater, which was on Leith Street at Leith and Industrial, they used to have these midnight shows sometimes. And, your parents would let you go to the midnight show, and here it is, 3 o'clock in the morning when the show let out, and kids just walking on home, and nobody bothered anybody.
Everybody sat on the porch. So in the evening, kids want to play outside. You play up under the street light until your mama said time to come in. But everybody was watching all the kids up under the street light.
We were family oriented. You don't see that anymore.
Yeah.
I remember my grandma. We ate dinner together every Sunday for sure.
Yes.
Every day.
We went to church together. Most of my family lived in the same area. The Skinners up the street, my cousins. My aunt, Della Rawls, up on St. John and Easy Street. My aunt on Massachusetts, my aunt on Detroit. We were all close-knitted people.
It was a fun place, man. We didn't have paved streets at that time. The milk came to us with a horse-driven milk carton from Sealtest Milk Company, and that's how we got our milk. They would put oil on the street to keep the dust down. We would play football in the street when we couldn't get up to the playground to Roosevelt or something like that. And the parents, they'd go to church on Sunday, they'd go to work during the week, and the children would play, so you would go to school, we would walk to school, to Roosevelt, come home at lunchtime and have lunch, and go back to school after lunch. Then after school was out, we'd come home, we'd do our chores or whatever your parents had for you to do, And then you would go out and play when you got that done. Then you go in and you take your bath or your shower or whatever, because we didn't have a shower, we had a bathtub at the time. We didn't have no shower at that particular house right there. And you get dressed for bed and you get up in the morning and do the same thing.
We did all of the activities that we participated in were, if they were held, Northern was across Saginaw Street, but generally we stayed on the east side of Saginaw Street. Nobody, and there were some businesses, but before our communities were more self-contained.
We had a store on the corner of Mississippi and St. John, owned by a Caucasian who was once a policeman called Hockles. We had a Jewish store on the corner of Oregon and St. John. That was the Fisher store. They were Jews.
There were businesses, funeral homes, Chandler Funeral Home over there. Miss Butler started her funeral home, who the Lawrence Moon interned under, and then she moved to where Lawrence Moon is now, and then he bought that facility and continued.
And right there was the corner of New Jersey and St. John. There was Holbrook store, which was a small store, black owned. Next door was a confectionery. And the confectionery was a little hangout for us. We go there, we have malt, banana split, pop, every little change, because what we were doing, we were turning in bottles and stuff and getting money, and we'd run little errands for people in the neighborhood. They give us a little change, and you accumulate, and then you get a little money from your parents. You could go and you could splurge a little bit. There were number men's, policy men's. A lot of businesses couldn't get loans from the bank. They redline you right now. But money was flowing because of people working in the shop and so forth and so on. There was gambling going on, there was numbers going on. People would hit the numbers. A number man might be able to bank you in your business where you had your barber shop. On St. John, you had Friley's barber shop. And on the industrial side, you had Mac's barber shop.
In the nighttime, we had the different clubs over there. We had a club over there called the RG Club. known as the Royal Garden, because segregation was so terrible in Flint that socialization always took place after the white folks had their party. The IMA, the Industrial Mutual Association Auditorium downtown, the white folks came in there at 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Then black folks could come in at midnight to in the morning. That's what they call after-hour joints. So we decided to supply our own after-hour joints. Second shifters worked in the plants. They would come to these social bars after hours.
It was dynamic. Lots of bars. Lots of music. I mean, you could walk down the street and hear all kinds of R&B music, blues, jazz. Lots of eateries.
Michigan Avenue was known as the red light district. That's where your prostitutes were. Then your sophisticated prostitutes were on St. John Street, just past Lee Street, called Lulu's. And the code word, "Could you loan me $2 to Lou get back?" That was a code to give me $2 to go to Lou.
The thing that really sticks with me about the St. John Street area was the fact that, there was such camaraderie, because we knew we were all in the same boat. It was sort of like a self-sustaining community. If you needed a cup of sugar, you could go next door and get it. If you needed a stick of butter, you could go next door or across the street and get it. It was just people helping people.
It was a beautiful community to grow up in. I think Brenda mentioned earlier, when we were kids, we were happy. We were clothed, we were fed well, our parents took care of their homes. It was a village, contrary to what a lot of things that you read about the St. John community now. It was a place that I loved growing up in.
By us being segregated, it forced us to unite and produce among ourselves. That's why we became greater entrepreneurs. We had our own business going in the St. John area. Like I say, by us being segregated, the North Side Industrial and St. John Street, we united, because we could buy anything we wanted from Stewart Street to Hamilton.
Yeah, we had a connection to wherever you were. If you were in Beecher and you were black, you was on the south side and you were black. If you was between the river and Saginaw Street and you were black, we could meet you on the street, and we had an understanding that we all suffered the same thing.
Really couldn't tell who was poor and who wasn't poor, because even the ones that didn't have as much as others, if they didn't have nice yards, they would take, if they didn't have nice grass, they would take flower seeds and plant, and the whole yard would be nothing but flowers.
Back in those days, we had, you could go downtown, leave all your doors and windows open, and come back and nothing be disturbed. You can't do that now. There was unity in the community. People looked out for each other and they stood up for each other.
We were fed, we were clothed, we had clean clothes, we were fed every day. Our parents worked. We cut our grass, we painted our houses. We weren't impoverished and we weren't poor, but that's the pictures that's being painted today.
I mean, you almost have to live St. John to understand how it was in terms of interpersonal relationships from one family to another.